Henry Brown is on trial. His own wife told investigators he came home on multiple Saturday nights, the same nights as the incidents, with stains on his clothes and no explanation. Under questioning, Brown talked. He gave specific details. The city believed it finally had its answer. Then John Rutherford took the stand. He told the court under oath that officials had chained Brown to a chair and applied physical force until he said what they wanted. The jury cleared Brown in a short deliberation. 3 weeks later, another incident occurred. At least 15 women lost their lives in Atlanta between 1911 and 1912. 6 men were taken in. Not one was found responsible. The case is still open. How does something like that happen? The answer starts with who these women were and what city they were living in. Maggie Brooke was 23 years old, a cook. She worked long days in someone else's home and walked back through the old Fourth Ward when the shift ended, the same route most of the women in this case took, through unlit streets near the Southern Railway lines. On October 3, 1910, she was found with a severe head injury. Most researchers treat her case as the earliest connected incident, the opening thread of a pattern that nobody was yet looking for. 35 years old, found near her home on January 22nd. Her head had been struck with force. Her throat had been injured. Her body was found less than 100 yards from her own front door, close enough that someone inside may have heard something. Her husband was brought in for questioning and released when officials found nothing connecting him. The case went nowhere. No one was named. No follow-up was run. Rosa Trice lived in the old Fourth Ward, a working-class black neighborhood where most of these women lived and worked. They were cooks, laundresses, housemaids. They walked home after dark through unlit streets near the rail lines. No safe routes. No arrangements made by anyone with authority to make them. The walk home was simply part of the job. That is the background to everything that follows in this case. Not Atlanta's skyline or its ambitions, but those unlit streets and the women who had no choice but to use them. A cook. She left her employer's home on Cooper Street on the evening of May 27th and never arrived at her own. Her sister found her the next morning in an unused field 25 yards from home. Throat injury. A coroner's hearing produced nothing. No person of interest was named. 2 paragraphs, page 7 of the newspaper. That was the full extent of what Belle Walker's case received. Found near the Southern Railway line. Struck with a brick first, then struck again with a rail coupling pin taken from the scene. Throat injury, moved forcibly into a cluster of bushes. This was the case that first prompted the Atlanta Journal to run a headline asking whether one person was responsible for all of it. The question was right. It had come too late. Coroner Paul Donahue publicly stated what the records showed. Every incident had occurred on a Saturday night. That pointed to someone with a regular weekly schedule. Obligations the rest of the week, Saturday available. Officials acknowledged it. The pattern continued regardless. The community had already been responding on its own. Churches held regular warning meetings. Leaders coordinated alerts across neighborhoods. The Baltimore Sun reported in July 1911 that black domestic workers across Atlanta were turning down evening work rather than risk the walk home. These were women who needed those wages. They were making a cold, calculated choice between income and safety, because no institution was making that choice for them. 40-year-old Lena Sharp left home on Hanover Street to buy groceries on the evening of July 1st. She didn't come back. Her daughter Emma Lou went looking for her. Emma Lou found her mother in the street. She also found the man standing over her. He said, "Don't be afraid. I never hurt girls like you." Then he drove a weapon into Emmylou back. Emmylou survived. She gave officials a description: tall, broad-shouldered, well-dressed, wide-brimmed black hat. That is the only first-hand description in this entire case. Both major Atlanta papers ran it on the front page. The New York Times covered it. The person Emmylou described remained completely unknown. 20 years old. Head struck with a 2-pound rock found nearby. Throat injured. Shoes removed, not just left at the scene. Taken. Henry Huff was detained, last seen with her that evening. Fresh marks on his arms, stained clothing. A grand jury charged him. The cases continued while he was held. He was cleared. The shoe detail is one of those elements that appears in multiple cases throughout this series and never gets resolved. Sadie Hawley's case, Marianne Duncan's case, others. The shoes were removed each time, not discarded nearby, genuinely gone. Whether that was deliberate, habitual, or meaningful in some way the record doesn't explain, nobody ever established. It just keeps appearing, case after case, with no answer attached to it. Marianne Duncan, 20. Found August 31st, between railway tracks in the Blandtown area. Throat injured, shoes removed, the 8th confirmed case. The pattern had continued regardless of who was in custody. Minnie Wise. Found November 10th, head and throat injured. Her right index finger had been severed at the joint. Her husband was initially looked into, and nothing was established. Mary Putnam, November 21st, 1911. The most severe case in the series. Head severely injured, throat wound inflicted. Heart removed from the chest and placed beside her. A tracking dog followed a trail 200 yards before losing it at a road. By the end of 1911, at least 15 women were gone. Some researchers, accounting for earlier and later connected cases, placed the true number at 21. Every confirmed case had happened on a Saturday night, near rail lines, on unlit ground, the walk these women took every evening after work. The earliest cases, Belle Walker, Rosa Trice, received so little formal attention that by the time officials began treating them as connected, the records from those months were essentially gone. No preserved scene notes, no formal statements from people who had been in the area. The investigative team was working with gaps that could never be filled, because the material to fill them had never been collected in the first place. That was the foundation. By the time the press was comparing these incidents to Jack the Ripper, and the mayor had received a formal petition, the investigation was already building on nothing. The early failures compounded every month that followed. Reverend Henry Hugh Proctor of the First Congregational Church made a direct, practical request to the city: hire black investigators who could move inside the community's networks. His argument was logical. Black residents had information. They would share it with people they trusted. They would not share it with white officials from the same institution that had stood by in 1906. The city declined. The investigation remained entirely white-led from start to finish. While the formal investigation stumbled, the community did not wait. Church meetings every week, neighborhood alert networks passing warnings door to door. A $25 reward for information, real money for working families. A formal petition from black ministers delivered directly to the mayor and the governor. That petition was received, noted in the official record, and changed nothing. In November 1911, an unnamed official told reporters that the reason the cases hadn't been resolved was that the black community wasn't cooperating. The community that had been running warning networks, raising money, and filing formal petitions for months, publicly blamed for the investigation's failure. Henry Huff, detained after Sadie Hawley's case, formally charged, cleared when the cases continued while he was held. Todd Henderson, brought in on a vague resemblance to Emma Lou's description and what officials called strong circumstantial documentation. Cleared. Charles Owens, found responsible for one case and given a life sentence. Most researchers today believe it was a misidentification. The incidents appear to have continued after he was imprisoned. He was likely the wrong man. Every time the same cycle: public pressure, an official announcement, a case presented as solid, then a courtroom, and it all came apart. August 10th, 1912. Henry Brown, also known as Lawton Brown, was brought in after his wife told officials he had come home on multiple Saturday nights with marks on his clothing and no explanation. Under questioning, Brown gave specific details about the cases. The city believed this was finally the one. His trial opened in October 1912. Then John Rutherford took the stand. He told the court that officials had physically restrained Brown and applied pressure until Brown said what they wanted. Brown's legal team showed he had a documented history of confirming things under duress, and that every detail he gave was available in that week's newspapers. The jury cleared Brown after a short deliberation. No physical documentation independently linked him to any case. The entire case rested on a statement the court refused to accept. Within 3 weeks of the acquittal, another incident occurred. The person responsible had never been in that courtroom. By the end of 1911, here is where things stood: 15 women gone. A documented Saturday night pattern that the coroner had flagged publicly in July. The only first-hand description of the responsible person: tall, broad-shouldered, well-dressed, wide-brimmed black hat, provided by a 14-year-old girl in July, filed and not meaningfully followed up. 2 major Atlanta newspapers now covering the cases. A New York Times report, a formal petition from the black community delivered to the governor, a $25 community-funded reward, and 0 persons of interest with anything solid linking them to the core series. Henry Huff had been charged and cleared. The incidents had continued while he was held. That fact alone should have reset the entire investigation. It didn't. After Emma Lou Sharp's survival in July 1911, both major Atlanta papers expanded their coverage. The case was now on the front page. National press had picked it up. Investigators were under pressure in a way they had not been during the first 5 months, when Belle Walker, Rosa Trice, and Addie Watts received almost no formal documentation. That pressure produced something. It produced detentions, public announcements, the appearance of progress. What it did not produce was a resolution, because the early months of missing documentation, unrecorded scenes, and uninterviewed community members had already made a solid case nearly impossible to build. The investigation was not going to find its way back from that, and everyone involved, if they were honest, knew it. Maggie Brooke, 23. Cook, October 3rd, 1910. Severe head injury. One of the earliest connected cases found before the pattern had a name. Rosa Trice, 35. January 22nd, 1911. Head and throat injuries. Found near her front door. Her husband brought in and released. Belle Walker. May 28th, 1911. Throat injury. First confirmed case in the core series. 2 paragraphs in the newspaper. Addie Watts, June 15th, 1911. First time the press compared these cases to Jack the Ripper. It took 6 confirmed incidents before they did. Lena Sharp, 40. July 1st, 1911. Her daughter Emma Lou survived, and gave the only first-hand description in this entire case. Sadie Holly, 20, July 11th, head struck, shoes removed, Henry Huff detained and cleared. Marianne Duncan, 20, August 31st, throat injured, shoes removed, 8th confirmed case. Eva Florence, autumn 1911. Henry Brown was brought in 1912 in connection with her case and cleared. Minnie Wise. November 10th, 1911, head and throat injuries. Right index finger severed at the joint. Mary Putnam. November 21st, 1911, the most severe case in the series. Ellen Maddox, autumn 1911. She survived the initial incident. She gave a brief statement to officials before passing from her injuries. She never saw the face of the person responsible. 15 confirmed, possibly 21 when earlier and later connected cases are included. The responsible person for the core series. Never identified, never brought to account. The case, still officially open. None of these women has a memorial in Atlanta. None of the locations carries a marker. Their names do not appear on any official city acknowledgement. Not a plaque, not a statement, not a named location. The most complete account of their story is Jeffrey Wells's 2011 book, built from years spent going through newspaper archives that most researchers had never looked at carefully. Outside of that work and the academic research that followed, their names exist almost nowhere in the public record. They were not unknown in their lifetimes. They were known to their neighbors, their churches, the families they worked for 6 days a week. They were simply not visible to the institutions that were supposed to respond when something happened to them. And when something did happen, over and over, across 2 years, the response confirmed exactly what their community had long understood about how much their lives were worth to the city around them. Same method, same day, same type of location, same category of target. Over more than a year with no real break in the pattern. Coroner Donahue said publicly in July 1911 that the Saturday night consistency pointed to one person with a fixed schedule. Historian Jeffrey Wells, who spent years working through the full newspaper archive, concluded the core series showed the consistent pattern of a single individual. That level of regularity, same day, same method, across 15 confirmed cases, is genuinely hard to attribute to coincidence. The Atlanta Constitution argued in an editorial at the time that the cases were likely the work of several men. Some later incidents had different elements, methods that don't quite match the core series. Some researchers treat the outer edges as genuinely separate. Without surviving physical documentation, without case files from 1911, this cannot be definitively settled. Both positions are defensible. Neither can be proved. 3 possible answers, none confirmed by the record. 1. The responsible person left Atlanta for work, personal reasons, or because they were held elsewhere for an unrelated matter. 2. The community's sustained self-protection, the warning networks, the women refusing night walks, the organized alerts, made isolated targets far harder to find.
One of the men imprisoned during this period had some genuine connection to some of the cases, even if the formal process never properly established it. Newspaper accounts attributed incidents to the Atlanta Ripper name as late as 1924. Whether those were genuinely connected to the 1911 core or simply using a name that had become shorthand in the city, the records do not clearly distinguish. The cases simply stopped. That is the full extent of what the record shows. The reason has never been established. The Jack the Ripper cases, London, 1888, 5 confirmed cases, have generated hundreds of books, dozens of documentaries, and continuous public discussion for over a century. The locations are tourist sites, academic papers are still being written. The Atlanta Ripper series, at least 15 cases, possibly 21, studied in a fraction of those contexts. That gap is not explained by the quality of the available record. It is explained by who the cases involved, and that explanation is itself part of what this case documents. In 1917, a woman named Laura Blackwell was found in her home. She had been struck with a heavy tool, a wound inflicted to her throat, and her clothing set on fire. A man named John Brown was taken in, tried, and found responsible. He was connected to 3 other cases with similar elements. Most historians treat his cases as separate from the 1911 core. The method was different enough to suggest a different responsible person, but his case also shows what was always possible. When scenes were documented properly and the process ran with adequate resources, a verdict was reachable. In the core series, those conditions never once existed. The case files from the earliest incidents are largely gone, either never properly created or lost in the years that followed. The newspaper archives that form most of the primary record are incomplete, inconsistent in dates and names, and written by reporters who were not covering these cases for the community that was living through them. Without surviving physical documentation, without anyone alive who was there, and without usable case files from 1911, the identity of the responsible person will not be established. That is not pessimism. That is simply what the record contains. Reverend Proctor asked for black investigators. Refused. Not delayed, not reconsidered. Refused. Emma Lou Sharp, 14 years old, having just survived an attempt on her life, gave investigators every detail she could the morning after. The description went into a file. The cases continued. It was never the basis for a sustained community-level search. The community organized, warned each other, raised money, signed formal petitions, and delivered them to the mayor and the governor. They did everything an engaged community is supposed to do. They were publicly blamed for the investigation's failure. Each of those was a choice, made by real people in real institutions with real power. Each choice made a resolution less likely than it already was. The responsible person for the core series, whoever walked through the old Fourth Ward on those Saturday nights, was never identified, never faced any formal consequence. As far as the official record is concerned, they simply ceased to exist after 1912. Atlanta has never formally acknowledged what it failed to do for these women. No memorial, no official statement, no reckoning. What happened in 1911 and 1912 was left in the newspaper archives and in the work of historians who cared enough to look. These women deserved better. They didn't get it, and more than 100 years on, the least we can do is say their names clearly and not look away. 15 women lost their lives. No verdicts for the core series, no memorials, a case that has never been formally closed, and a city that has never formally said it failed them. If this story should be known, and it should, share it. Send it to someone who has never heard these names, because the reason this case is forgotten is the same reason it went unsolved. These women were not considered worth the full attention of the institutions around them. Sharing this video is a small way to push back against that.